Hello, and thank you for having a listen to this week's episode of Secure Insights with NDK Cyber. So, for those of you that aren't aware, NDK Cyber is first and foremost a cybersecurity recruitment company. That's our bread and butter. That's what we've done for the last 10 plus years, recruiting individuals from entry level to leadership CISO style positions, from end users, environments, to vendors, to security consulting, and everything in between. That's what we love, that's what we enjoy doing. This here is the Secure Insights podcast to really add value, to shine light on certain areas of cybersecurity, hot talking points, what people are talking about, what people should be talking about, and so on. So this week I'm very excited to be joined by Gianna Driver. Gianna Driver is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Exabeam, a global cybersecurity organization. So this week takes a bit of a different spin from a more security practitioner professional to somebody working in the space from more a people leadership perspective. So we run through everything from building an effective culture within cybersecurity, building partnerships for effective cybersecurity organization-wide. We go into work-life balance and how we get that right in today's day and age. And we also talk talent, of course. So there's a lot of common ground there with myself and Gianna, what we've done from a AI perspective to staying competitive when hiring, to the talent shortage, transferable skills, a ton of good stuff in this episode as well. So really excited to share and open to feedback as always.
Well, Gianna, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm super excited to be here.
Thanks for jumping on. So the listeners would have heard a brief introduction from me there, but do you want to give them a bit of an insight, a bit of a background to who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So, Gianna Driver, I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer at a cybersecurity company called Exabeam. I'm based in the Bay Area, and I've been in the HR people space for, oh gosh, going on 20 years. And I've seen the industry evolve and shift quite a bit, the HR industry. And what I think is very interesting is there are lessons to be learned that are transferable from company to company, regardless of industry. So whether that be cybersecurity or gaming tech, healthcare tech, fintech, et cetera. So really excited to dive into our conversation today.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. I'm excited to get into this one. I think in fact, I know you're the first CHRO we've had on the podcast. Typically, it's more technical or maybe sales leaders or CEOs and such. So I'm excited to get your spin on a few of the hot topics at the minute. So you touched on your background there and working in tech, now in cybersecurity. I imagine part of your role is to ensure the culture of an organization is on the right lines, on the right track.
Mhm.
In your eyes, what does an effective culture look like?
Mm. Well, so let's first define culture so that we're all, kind of on the same page. I think of culture as something that is living, breathing, and ever evolving and changing. It's something that exists whether or not you're intentional about creating it. And it can be a beautiful unifying force. And at the same time, it can, if not done thoughtfully, it can also be something that creates distance between people. So culture, let's think of it as this kind of living, breathing aura energy that kind of binds us all right together. And in terms of creating culture, I think it starts at the top. So from a board level, a CEO level, leadership level, and then throughout the organization. And every employee, every part of the organization affects that culture. And what I've learned is, be that cybersecurity or any other industry, some of the most effective cultures are ones where there's trust, there's open communication, there is psychological safety, those things that we inherently know, but being very intentional about creating. It makes for really happy, productive, innovative workplaces.
That's a really good point, actually. I think what you said there, I'd never even thought of around you can create culture without even trying it, whether you're unconscious, you're creating a
Yeah.
culture, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's probably something to keep in mind, well, certainly for myself and others may be listening as well. So and tech and being in cybersecurity, I mean, so what's important about a culture in these spaces? You can hear some horror stories, which maybe we'll jump into later. But
Yeah.
what sort of what do you look for in a tech business or a cyber business that makes and
Yeah.
leads towards a good culture?
Yeah, well, so what I'll say is when we look at cybersecurity and we look at, breaches, bad actors, that type of thing, a company's culture has a direct impact on its level of risk. So, in other words, I'll give you some examples. In a culture where there's openness and there's psychological safety where employees feel heard, they feel like they can have hard conversations, they feel their managers care about them, listen to them, and also cultures where if you see something, say something, where it's not kind of a taboo thing, and it's not a witch hunt type of a culture, but it's like, oh wait, hold on a second, that seemed kind of weird, like what's going on there, but just a really open type of culture, we see that there is less risk, as opposed to cultures where there's secrecy, there's fear, there's shame, blame, finger pointing. Those types of more negative and toxic cultures tend to breed more of an environment for bad actors, which, we know from the data that many breaches and, exfiltration attempts and things like that are from internal employees. So I think culture has a direct impact on cybersecurity.
Wow. So the stat is then that bad culture equals, broadly speaking here, but bad culture equals more likelihood for breaches.
Yeah, definitely. I think that a bad culture creates an environment where there's more opportunity for this to happen. Not saying that a bad culture will equal,
No.
a data breach or exfiltration or whatever, but I think if we look at the statistics, cultures where people feel cared for, respected, like they can have really kind and honest conversations, those tend to be safer environments and ones with less cybersecurity internal, risk.
Yeah, and just from doing what we do in the recruitment world, speaking to the leaders in the space, it's more often than not exactly that. It's a CISO or whoever's at the top of the chain of cybersecurity would much rather know about, yes, I clicked on an email, I'm sorry, here's what happened, than finding it
Exactly.
3 months later via a news outlet or something.
Exactly. And that's where having psychological safety and, you can speak without fear of repercussion. Oh, by the way, I clicked on this thing and I thought that it was a movie for a blah, blah, blah. And it actually but just being a culture where you can openly say that and you can make mistakes or you can go to, your CISO or whomever and stop, the phishing attempts or the spam or whatever. Those are ones where we can quickly detect and ring fence any sort of breach or risk.
Yeah, indeed. And speaking from experience, I don't know if you've experienced the same sort of thing, not to pigeonhole certain career paths or skill sets here, but I've noticed that people talk about, if you take legal, for example, sometimes people in legal are maybe less likely to say, yes, that was my fault. I put my hand up there, maybe from a pride perspective, than maybe someone in a different area of the business that's maybe just started or entry level or something like that. So there's so many more moving parts to this. I find it so fascinating
And
than
ultimately, I think creating a workplace where it's okay to raise your hand and say, "Oh, I made a mistake. I'm really sorry about that. Like, what do I do now?" Okay, great. We all make mistakes. Let's learn from it and let's quickly, figure out what we can do to address the mistake and ensure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in your role then, it must be a big part of that must be sort of bridging the gaps between not only the HR division and people, but also cybersecurity, but also the other areas of the business. And
Mhm.
so I guess my question is how do you get all the business units aligned and on the same page and working together?
Mhm. Well, that is the $1 million question, isn't it,
That's a
James?
very big question, isn't it? So I'll hand over to you for the next 45 minutes and
Well, I'll preface and say, I don't think there's a silver bullet solution, but some tips and tricks and things that I found to be very helpful here at Exabeam. The partnership between the CISO and the HR people leader is critical.
okay,
And I would say here, thankfully, our CISO, Tyler, is just phenomenal and fantastic. And he and I have a really awesome partnership. And so with that, we're able to also then think strategically about our business and how do we communicate with each other? How do our teams communicate with each other? But then how are we communicating with the organization to make sure that cybersecurity awareness training is taken seriously and completed? That's something where our teams partner. We also have playbooks so that whenever there's something that is detected, there's a concern, or there's an upcoming event that we want to be very proactive about and potentially have some folks on watch lists or whatever, we've partnered together so that we've got those standard operating procedures. And then to your point about how do we scale some of this across the org, thankfully we're a cybersecurity business, so people know like this is our industry. And with some of the trainings and our all hands and engagements and meetings where we bring everybody together, we're able to share what we do and why we do that and what our protocols are. So we try to instill a little bit of fun in all of this, so it's not just kind of mundane, information coming at people.
Yeah. So you touched on the awareness piece there, and awareness for me, in my eyes, is from the last, if you go back 10 years or so, awareness wasn't even a thing really. It was maybe a document you sign somewhere very deep, but now
Mhm.
it's come on leaps and bounds. You've got all these virtual escape rooms, you've got cyber sort of wargaming type stuff going on, and it's much more engaging. Have you seen anything particularly effective within your culture and in your organization that's done well?
Yeah. So I'll caveat and I'll say, I think at the end of the day, when you're requiring people to take training, there is always a little bit of an internal sigh. Oh my gosh, like you're forcing me to take this, right? So let's just kind of name that for what it is and say, okay, it is what it is. Now that we all are on the same page, that we're rolling our eyes that we have to do this, now let's figure out like how to make it as painless as possible. So we have a couple different vendors that we work with, and I wouldn't say it's a gamified type of security awareness training, but the modules that people have to watch are short, right? No one wants to sit through a 2 hour long security awareness training with a quiz at the end, but they're kind of these short snippets that are told in stories. So there's a bit of, role playing that happens, and the characters are relatable, but also funny. Like I think internally we all sort of make fun of them. And it's interesting because during some of our all hands gatherings and meetings, people will make reference and jokes to to some of the characters who are in these trainings, because we've all taken them because we have to. And if you don't take the trainings, then either my team or the security team are going to be knocking on your door saying, by the way, please please complete the training. So we instill fun with it, and I think that's key at the end of the day, right? Like we all have to do this, we might as well do it with a couple chuckles along the way.
Yeah, that's fair. And to your earlier point around the CHRO and the CISO's relationship being so vital, I think before we spoke, if I'm being totally transparent, I hadn't really sort of considered that as like a vital. You immediately go CTO, CIO, CEO, and of course CHRO is in the C-suite as well, but it wouldn't be sort of the immediate connection. But I think with what you said there, it's so clear and
Yeah.
obvious and right in front of us. Do
Yeah.
you think that organizations generally embody that approach?
I think that is something here at Exabeam that we do really well. And I also think part of it is that our CISO and I are just really proactive, leaders who care. Like we care about culture, we care about creating a safe environment, and one where there's open information, but we also let people know, okay, these are safe practices that are going to keep our business safe, our data safe, our customers safe, versus things on the outside. So I don't know that I've ever in my career experienced this level of partnership. And I think part of that is it goes back to just our overall company culture, which is one where from our CEO onwards, everyone works thoughtfully and well with one another. Of course, we're humans, and people have disagreements and stuff. I'm not saying that disagreements are bad. Actually, I think disagreements can be very good things. But this is where culture is vital, and thankfully we've got a pretty stellar team of folks.
That's awesome. And I guess just lastly on this point here, if you're a CHRO and you're listening to this and you're thinking, you know what, I'm not that tight with our CISO. I've met him a few times or her a few times, and we get along. We don't really do too much together. Is there anything
Yeah.
you'd say that you might be able to sort of just get their engagement with?
I would say reach out, right? Like be proactive and say, hey, CISO, I lead people, you lead, information security. These worlds intermingle and are critical to keeping our employees and our company safe. Let's sit down and talk about where our worlds overlap. Let's also be clear about who owns what and how we can proactively get in front of would-be data breaches and things like that. And my guess is that most CISOs would probably welcome that conversation. And I would also say for the CISOs out there, if you've not partnered with and engaged your chief people officer, chief HR officer, knock on their door and say, let's sit down and have a conversation. Because again, going back to the data, so much of security risk is tied to internal folks. And it could be without bad intentions, right? It could be employees who just aren't thoughtful about logging in from an internet cafe or an airport or something like that, or leaving credentials open, or it could be very benign, non-malicious types of actions. And I think that's where a CISO and an HR leader can really partner together to make sure their workforce is informed.
That's bang on. And you lifted one of the questions right off my page here that was going to be along the lines of you're a CISO and you're
Yeah.
listening to this and you're thinking, crikey, I don't have that connection either.
Yeah.
What would be some of the approaches that you would welcome from a CISO and just to get that initial conversation started? So maybe some quick wins in your
Yeah.
30 days, say, for example.
Yeah, I think a CISO who approached me and said, Gianna, I really want to think strategically about how we inform our workplace, all of our employees about our security posture and our practices. And I also want to figure out ways that we can be preventive. I think that's going to open up the minds of HR leaders. And I think they're going to lean into those conversations. I mean, most of us in HR, contrary to some of the stigmas out there, are people, right? Like we're people who go into this field because we enjoy people and helping people do their best work and helping organizations create environments where people can do their best work. So I think approaching it from a people-centric, problem solving strategy perspective is going to create a lot of openness in HR leaders.
I think that's fantastic, yeah, and I think just doing that will then, I guess, open doors naturally into the other
Yeah.
towers of IT, generally speaking, or even legal, and so on and so forth, and then
Yep.
leads into making a culture what it is.
Absolutely.
I wanted
Absolutely.
to ask you about a certain area. So
Yeah.
there's a fair amount of chat at the moment around burnout in cybersecurity and
Mhm.
looking at work-life balance and again, I guess creating the better cultures that we talked about here. So without naming names on companies, but there's maybe been some organizations out there that in the
Yeah.
tech space have embodied this. Look, we've got a new release of a video game coming out, or we've got this new product launch, or we're IPOing here. It's all hands
Yeah.
to the pump, and it's led to some pretty negative stories in the media.
Yeah.
From your experience, is there a good way to sort of foster a good work-life balance?
So I think fundamentally, whether you're in cybersecurity, you're an engineer, you're an HR person, you're a marketing person, salesperson, or you're in any other industry, we're all human at the end of the day. And we do our best work when we're balanced. Now, to be clear, I don't think that balance on a day-to-day basis needs to mean a solid 8 hours of sleep and 8, 9, 10 hours of work. Like I don't think it needs to look like that on a day-to-day basis. But I think being very clear that we don't want to burn people out. When you burn people out, they make mistakes, they look over things, there are just human errors, and you just like fatigue. It clouds our ability to think thoughtfully. That said, I think there's something about being clear with employees that we're going to do sprints, right? So there could be a sprint and these moments where we all need to run fast and meet a deadline, a milestone, a deliverable, an update, a release, or whatever it is. But then take a moment after that to celebrate the wins and to rest, to recharge. That is absolutely critical to innovation and productivity and wellness and happiness. So again, I want to emphasize that I think work-life balance doesn't mean that at any given moment everything is in balance. I view work-life balance as on the whole, it balances out, but there will be moments of sprints. And I think that's okay. And I think that's important. We all need to row together very quickly sometimes. And then let's also make sure that we pause, catch our breath, celebrate what we've just done, and then prepare for the next sprint.
Understood. And I think you're bang on. I think there will be moments of that sprint nature. And if everything was 9 to 5 beautifully every day, all day, I think we'd have a much easier life. But sadly, that's not always the way it goes.
Yeah,
So
that'd be kind
when
of boring too, James, right? Like, wouldn't it, if it was just like kind of mundane and dull, right? Like, I think many of us would be like, oh gosh, that sounds good sometimes, but no, I don't think we'd really want that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need to be sort of challenged and stressed to a degree,
Yeah,
like you say, hitting that burnout figure. And
yeah.
so with the celebrating the wins, for example, I mean, I've spoken to people before that have been in a cyber sales role. We did really well. It was really exhausting month or quarter. And the
Hmm.
next thing I know, I've got to go and celebrate in Vegas or whatever. I'm burnt out. I don't really want to do that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
celebrating the wins doesn't always have to mean a big dinner or event or anything. It could just be a bit of downtime.
Absolutely. 100%. One of the things that we've done at Exabeam that our employees love are called thank you days. And so what we try to do is these are company-wide days off where you get to rest, recharge, do the things that are meaningful and regenerative, for you. And
Mm.
there's something about when you come back to your inbox, it hasn't exploded because the entire company has taken that moment to pause and catch their breath. Right? Because if you go on vacation or take time off, but everyone else is working, you come back and I don't know if you're like me, but my inbox has just multiplied. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, what is this? And once I get to the bottom of my inbox, if I ever get to the bottom of my inbox, it's like I need another vacation. As opposed to these thank you days, they are company-wide moments of respite and recharge. And it's not stigmatized, it's celebrated.
That's a really good point, actually. I guess if you're just like one or two people in a team of, I don't know, 50 taking a couple of days off, you're going to come back to what was the point of going away in the first place?
To insanity, yes.
Yeah, to insanity. Crikey, yeah. And I guess then on the back of that, so you've got the thank you days there. I think that's a fantastic policy to operate. A lot of our clients do a similar thing now, and it really lands well.
Mm-hmm.
It just lets, I guess, it more than anything else, you get the sort of the physical and the mental recharging, but you also get the appreciation of, okay, cool. The guys know I worked really hard on that assignment and they've recognized it through this. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a give and a take there to a degree.
Totally. And when we talk about creating cultures that are healthy, right? Because that was sort of what we started our conversation focused on. These moments of allowing employees to recharge and regenerate after a sprint or even a marathon, that matters to culture. That matters to employees. It goes a long way towards showing employees, I see you, I appreciate you, and I know you've worked really hard to help us achieve this shared milestone or goal. So please take care of yourself and then, yeah, like, come back for another day.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the best ways, and especially sort of low hanging fruit. If you're looking at, okay, we've had a couple of people leave maybe or talk about leaving through the culture, what can we do? That's a
Mhm.
pretty cost effective way, in my eyes anyway. I could be wrong.
Yep.
It's a pretty cost effective way of doing things.
Agreed. 100% agree.
Awesome. Can we talk about talent now? So our world sort of crossover in talent, I guess, to a degree.
Yes. Let's do it.
So AI is the buzzword of every day, the decade. Every tool I look at now has got AI in it from a recruitment standpoint, from a security standpoint, somewhere or another. Some of it's
Mhm.
AI washing, but maybe that's a conversation for another time. But with AI and talent at the moment, did you see AI influencing the talent pool and the most in-demand skills in our space?
Well, let me provide some background that's helpful as we think about AI. I know that it's the buzzword right now, and it's something a lot of people within cybersecurity and outside of cybersecurity are talking about. It's a buzzword in the HR spaces that I, am in. And I mean, truly, I think it's impossible to be in conversations these days about trends without bringing AI into the discussion.
Yeah.
All of that is to say, I think many of us in cybersecurity and certainly at Exabeam would agree that AI has been around for quite some time.
Mm.
Our algorithms, the way that we operate, have utilized machine learning, AI for years. So this is not a new concept or a new thing. I mean, the whole idea of being able to look at human behavior, trend lines, norms, and then see where there are anomalies or differences. It's the power of algorithms and artificial intelligence that then allows us to detect where there are breaches or potentially malicious activity.
Mm.
So AI is not something totally new to the cybersecurity space and industry. I think it's being used in new ways now. And so to answer your question around what are we seeing in the talent pool as it pertains to AI, what's interesting is I think that there are some really cool AI tools for recruiters
Mm.
so that some of our unconscious biases and things like that are solved for, and we're looking more at skills and competencies. I get really excited about that because I think there's a fair bit of unconscious bias that can come into play. And I'm not saying that AI is bias free because humans with biases, create a lot of these algorithms and tools, but I'm very excited about some of the innovation I'm seeing in the talent and AI space.
Indeed, and I think a lot of the questions that I'm sort of faced with almost weekly and almost daily tend to be along the lines of like, is AI going to come in and steal my job? Am I still going to have the demand? I did my master's in cybersecurity. I'm a year into industry now. All this AI is here,
Yeah.
and it's that sort of worry or concern. And I think I sort of counteract it with that AI is never going to take your job. AI might help your job. You might get tools in that really help you do the more mundane tasks. But I
Yes.
think having a human being there to join the dots, to speak to the
I
needs, it's
10,000% agree with you.
mm,
I think AI, because the use cases for AI are shifting and changing, I think
Mm,
that can feel very threatening to people at times.
mm,
As human beings, we tend to shy away from change, many of us, because it's scary and it's unknown. What we know is that AI is here and it's here to stay.
mm.
And so I think talent, professionals in the workplace, whether you're in the market or you have a role or a secure job, regardless, I think it's important that we become comfortable with leveraging AI to do our jobs.
Mm.
It's not going to replace us if we embrace it. In fact, I think that AI is going to allow us to do a lot more of the things that we love doing, the things that only humans can do. I think AI enables and empowers, because AI, to your point, James, can do some of those repetitive, mundane, very formulaic types of tasks, which is fabulous because we're not spending human hours doing that. That frees up time so that we can do the more interesting work that only humans can do.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we're safe in that regard. So I think it might change the landscape, but it's not going to remove jobs necessarily. And if
I
your
agree.
job is quite manual and quite sort of mundane or a lot of checking and things like that, then I think that will free you up to then focus on other areas that, we've all got that to-do list, that backlog of tasks that we haven't got around
Yep.
to yet. There's relationships
Yep.
we haven't built, that training we haven't looked into. So I think there's
Yep.
many, many opportunities to come off the back of this. So I'm
I
excited to where that.
wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
Yeah, really excited to see where that leads. And I guess I know it's been around a long time, like you say there, but it's this next wave seems to be mainstream and people are getting a hold of it and then doing really cool things with it. So quite excited to
Yeah.
see where that goes.
Same. Same.
So when it comes to even say, not just Exabeam, but maybe previous companies as well, there's demand for talent in the tech space and cybersecurity in particular. If I'm a CHRO and I'm being asked by my hiring managers, what can we do to bring people in? We haven't got the
Mhm.
flow of resumes, or we're not quite doing it. Are we standing out enough?
Mhm.
What's your sort of take on staying attractive to the best candidates in the market?
So I would say it's important to understand what differentiates you, right? So let's just all, at a company, let's be clear about why somebody would want to come work for us. What's our employer value proposition? What makes us attractive, right? Like as a workplace. And if you're having trouble thinking about that, which hopefully those answers are very quick and apparent, but should they not be, staying interviews I think are really helpful. So those are conversations with long tenured employees, just who are also high performing, just to have conversations to understand, tell me more about what keeps you here. Why are you here? 9 times out of 10, people and culture are going to be some of those things that folks cite when you ask them why they've stayed. And so I think the talent space is about talent attraction and not, necessarily having good poaching mechanisms. Because if you're doing the right things internally and you're open with the world about your culture and some of those things that you're doing, that's gonna attract the right people, right? Like that's going to be fun and exciting in a place where top talent wants to come and work. So I think it starts with some of these cultural elements that we've talked about and being really clear on those and then sharing them with the broader world.
Okay, cool. And so I see a lot of stuff out there that offers, free fruit and whatever, and it's like, okay, cool, but I think you need to go so much deeper than that into what you're actually doing. So,
Right.
is there anything maybe that Exabeam have done that's sort of gone, you know what, here's who we are, here's what we're doing, and that's really
Mhm.
helped sort of, I guess, put meat on the bone a bit, lifted the words off the page, brought it to life a little
Yeah.
bit, because everyone can read a job description or see a website, but I guess it's that initial call, that initial interview that helps sort of paint a picture for what it's like at Exabeam.
Yeah. So the freedom to be who you are is something that we take very seriously here. And I think ultimately we all want to be in a workplace where we can be who we are, where we feel seen, heard, we feel like we belong, we feel like we can ideate and brainstorm and do really cool stuff. And I think that when candidates have interactions with our talent team, because often that's one of the first conversations, they share that. But then also internally, we do a lot of fun, cool things that, I mean, honestly, James, we probably should be even better about broadcasting to the world. We have a number of employee resource groups that do some pretty fun activities. In fact, this afternoon, I'm going to a carnival celebration that some of our ARGs are helping to co-sponsor and organize. But we do these things all the time, and they're not just fun, events and activities. Like sometimes they're educational. It could be a book club. It could be an external speaker. It could be, other types of activities. But the point is, we try to have an environment where there's something for everyone and everyone's welcome, because what we've learned is fundamentally in cybersecurity, we want diversity. We want people who think outside of the box and think differently. Because I'll tell you, the bad actors out there, the malicious, folks behind many of the cybersecurity attacks and data breaches, they're thinking differently. They're thinking out of the box. And so to meet that threat, we need to have people who are very diverse in their thought processes and ways of thinking about the world and solving problems.
Absolutely. I think there's so many stats out there around the more diverse your team is and setup is, the better off you'll be overall. So yeah, I think it speaks volumes to that.
Totally agree.
Do you think there's a talent shortage in cybersecurity at the moment?
Yes and no, right? So I think if we think of talent through the myopic lens of must have cybersecurity experience, I mean, the cybersecurity space is a nascent space relative to many other sectors and industries, right? Like cybersecurity has only existed so long as we've had, cyber anything.
Mm.
And so in that sense, I think that it's still in more of an emerging sort of place. And so I think sometimes if we're looking for professionals who have X number of years of solely cybersecurity expertise, I think, yes, through that lens, you could say, there's a shortage in cybersecurity. But what I would offer is if we broaden the aperture, right? If we look more expansively at the talent pool, I don't think there's as dire of a shortage of talent in cybersecurity, because if we say, okay, cybersecurity talent doesn't need to have 15, 20 years of cybersecurity, experience, but instead we're going to think about it through the lens of, okay, here are certain experiences, practices, competencies that are important to us, and we can train up on some of the other more cybersecurity specific things, then I think there's less of a shortage.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's a case of, just as an example, I'll caveat this first of all, actually, with saying there are absolutely roles that do need experience in certain fields.
Agree.
We can't just put everyone into every role here, but I think there are certain situations where we hired for an e-commerce organization before that we're looking for an application security engineer. We're struggling a little bit with sort of the market. It was mid-level salary and a few other factors as well. But then all they had to do was sort of look just laterally, and there's a person in the software engineering team who, loving cybersecurity in their spare time, would never have thought to apply for this one because the job description was written in a way of X years experience and this certification and that. So it's intimidating. In reality, they can do the role, and they're almost doing it right now. So I think there's that bridge that I think it's much better than it used to be, but it
I
just
agree with you. I think it's better, but I think there's still room for continued work and improvement there. But I think your example is a perfect one. That's case in point, right? Of where if you're looking for this specific profile and experience set, then yeah, it can feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm just, I'm not seeing what I'm looking for in the market. But look laterally, look at, adjacent markets, industries, and spaces. And I think we're likely to find more people.
exactly. Is that something you work with your hiring teams on?
Yeah, so our talent team, they're at the forefront of this, but then also we work with our hiring managers to, really look honestly at the requirements and the skill sets that we put in our job descriptions, but also as we're vetting candidates, as we're having those conversations. Sometimes what happens is people are not conscious of this, right? And so it involves just a pause and then a conversation around, okay, let's think about what you're looking for. What are the behaviors and the skill sets? Does someone I'm just going to take, a enterprise level sales and cybersecurity, do they have to have sold cybersecurity products for 15 years? Or are we open to people who've also sold SaaS, cloud-based enterprise like technologies with very complicated deal flows and stuff, and they've successfully done it, but they've not done it in cybersecurity? Would that be okay? So I think it's sometimes pausing to take a look around and explain to hiring managers that there's amazing talent out there that may not fit exactly every bullet point on a JD. And we've found that hiring managers actually, when you point this out, they're pretty receptive and open. They actually get excited because ultimately they want great people on their teams.
Absolutely. It opens the field up. And I've heard reports, and our clients have done this as well. And it's a case of, you know what, that really helped because we didn't have to then pay the premium that sometimes comes with cybersecurity. We could
Yep.
sort of work around that. It fit better. And actually, there was no bad habits they came with. We were sort of molding them to exactly what we sell or
The
we do.
candidates come in with an open mindset, not a mindset of, oh, I know everything and I've done everything, so let me tell you how it's done. As a, like instead, they're like, okay, I've done these things, but there's a lot I don't know. Let me figure out and learn. And that's what we want. Those are the types of candidates that are fabulous.
Exactly that. And hopefully you're doing all this plays into the experience or the skill shortage and also the diversity factor and everything else. So it all helps the bigger picture move forward, I think.
Agree. You're right. It's just then it becomes a really powerful, awesome ecosystem and company.
Exactly. So the more we can do for that, the better I feel. So let's keep banging that drum for sure. And so we're almost at time here, but it's flown by and we've darted around a lot of different areas, I know. So thank you for putting up with my battering of questions there. What are you excited about over the next year or so?
I'm excited about where we are in cybersecurity at this moment in time. Cybersecurity is hot right now. Like, this is an amazing, fast moving space to be in. Part of it's, I mean, the times, it's the world, it's, where we are with AI and with technology and everything. And I think there's increased awareness that cybersecurity, holy smokes, like, it is critical to success. It is imperative that leaders are thinking about this, and that's amazing for our industry and space. So I love where we are, and then I couple that with people, right? So if this is a growing space with a lot of energy and a lot of change and evolution happening, well, I guarantee you there are people who are driving that and helping that happen. And that's where, looking at this through the lens of a strategic people leader becomes equally exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think we've got a very exciting year ahead of us. We'll go out a few weeks after recording, but we're in January now, so we'll see what the year holds. But I'm certainly looking forward to it too. So thank you for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it. If people wanted to get in touch, where could they find you?
Yeah, ping me on LinkedIn, Gianna Driver at Exabeam on LinkedIn, and I should pop up. Otherwise, they can contact you, James.
Again, and we'll chuck a link and everything below as well, just to make it easy. But no,
Cool.
thank you again for sharing your time and your thoughts on everything. And we'll speak again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Gianna.